It started with a letter taped to my gate, printed on HOA letterhead I'd never seen before. It was full of mandatory compliance language, fines for non-regulation fencing, and a demand that I attend the next board meeting or face legal consequences. I almost laughed. This property wasn't in any HOA. In fact, it had been in my family since my great-grandfather homesteaded it in the 1920s. But the letter wasn't the real punch in the gut. The real blow was the signature at the bottom. Karen Whitfield, the same woman who had been squatting in my south pasture for the past 5 years, living rent-free in a rundown mobile home she claimed grandfathered rights to occupy. I tolerated her presence because my father, before he passed, had made me promise not to throw her out immediately. "She's got nowhere else to go," he'd said, and back then, she was just a quiet nuisance. But in recent years, she'd become something else entirely, a self-styled enforcer who told neighbors where they could park, slapped warning notices on mailboxes, and even tried to dictate what crops I could plant. And now she was claiming not only that my land was part of her HOA, but that she had the authority to regulate me. I drove straight to her trailer that afternoon, letter in hand. She was out front, watering a row of plastic flowers jammed into the dry earth. "Afternoon, Karen," I called, keeping my voice calm. "You want to explain this?" She didn't miss a beat. "The board voted to expand our jurisdiction to include your property. It's for community safety. You'll be expected to pay back dues for the last 5 years. I blinked. "You mean the 5 years you've been living on my land without paying me a cent?" Her chin jutted out. "This land is part of the original subdivision. You just don't know the rules. I'm protecting property values." That was the moment something in me shifted. I'd been playing nice out of respect for my dad's memory. But this was beyond arrogance. It was theft dressed up as authority. "Karen," I said evenly, "you have 24 hours to vacate. I'll have the sheriff here tomorrow." She laughed, actually laughed, and waved her hose at me like I was a pesky salesman. "You can't evict me. I have rights." That night, I pulled the property deed from my safe, the original survey maps, and a folder of correspondence with the county assessor. I called my attorney, who'd been itching for years to help me get her off my land, and I gave him the green light. By morning, we had a formal notice of eviction, signed by a judge, and a date stamped by the sheriff's office. I posted it on her door at 9 a.m. sharp. She tore it down, crumpled it, and shouted across the pasture, "You're going to regret this." What she didn't know was that my attorney had also pulled every record of her HOA. It wasn't registered with the state, had no legal jurisdiction, and here was the twist: wasn't even recognized by the homeowners she claimed to represent. Several of them had been waiting for someone to challenge her and jumped at the chance to sign sworn statements against her. That afternoon, Karen called her board meeting in the yard of her trailer. It was just her sister, and a neighbor she'd bullied into joining. They sat around a card table with a stack of papers, pretending to pass motions about disciplinary actions against me. I stood at my fence line with my phone recording, every word captured. By evening, a sheriff's deputy rolled up my drive. Deputy Hayes was a man I'd known since high school, and he grinned when I handed him the eviction order. "I've been waiting for this," he said. "She's pulled the same stunt with 3 other properties, but you're the only one with the paperwork to shut her down." We walked back over together, and Hayes read the order aloud. Karen's face went from smug to red to pale in the span of 30 seconds. "You can't do this," she sputtered. "I'm the HOA president." "Of an HOA that doesn't exist," Hayes said. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to be off this property. Anything left will be considered abandoned." The rest of the day, I watched from my porch as she paced, called people, and occasionally shot glares in my direction. I knew she was planning something. Karen never went quietly. And sure enough, just before sunset, a white pickup pulled in and 2 men began hauling boxes from her trailer into the truck bed. They weren't friends, they were repo agents. Turns out she'd defaulted on loans tied to property she didn't even own. By dawn, the south pasture was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Karen was out there in a robe, barking orders to no one in particular while pacing between her rusted trailer and the growing piles of junk scattered in the grass. The repo truck from the night before had already hauled off her appliances, leaving her front door hanging crooked on one hinge. A few of her so-called HOA board members, really just two neighbors she'd browbeaten into showing up, stood awkwardly by her lawn chairs, clutching styrofoam coffee cups like they were shields. At exactly 8:45 a.m., I saw the dust plume of the sheriff's cruiser coming up my driveway. Deputy Hayes stepped out, all business now, a clipboard in one hand and the eviction order in the other. "Morning, Karen," he called. 15 minutes to comply. If you're not gone, we'll remove you and anything you leave behind." She tried for bravado. "I filed an injunction. My lawyer says this land is under HOA jurisdiction and I—" Hayes cut her off with a dry chuckle. "We've checked the filings. You don't have a lawyer. You have a printout from a free legal advice blog that doesn't apply in this state. Pack it up." Her face flushed deep crimson. "You're all going to regret this when the HOA sues." "The HOA doesn't exist," he said, his voice flat as a hammer. "You've been impersonating an entity and issuing fraudulent fines. The county prosecutor will be in touch." That landed like a slap. She faltered, looking around at the board members, but they wouldn't meet her eyes. One mumbled something about needing to get to work and slipped away toward his car. Hayes gave the signal and two deputies stepped forward. They didn't manhandle her, just stood there, arms crossed, as the countdown ticked closer to 0. When 9 a.m. hit, Hayes nodded. "That's time." Karen made one last desperate play, retreating into the trailer and slamming the door. From the porch, I heard the deadbolt click. Hayes sighed, walked over, and with a gentle but deliberate push, swung the door open. The frame was so warped it barely latched. "Ma'am, you need to leave," he said again, and this time there was no fight left in her. She shuffled out carrying a single overstuffed bag, muttering under her breath. By 9:15, the deputies had cleared the trailer. The rest of her belongings, old furniture, boxes of faded paperwork, and a pile of HOA notices were left in the pasture. I'd already arranged for a disposal crew to haul it away by noon. The twist came when one of the deputies brought me a battered file box they'd found under her bed. Inside were folders labeled with neighbor names, full of copies of the bogus fines she'd been issuing for years. There were also letters threatening lawsuits, doctored bylaw documents, and even a ledger showing she'd collected over $40,000 in dues since moving onto my land. Not 1 cent had gone to any community project. It was all spent on her own expenses. I handed it straight to Hayes. "Looks like you've got her for fraud, too." He smiled grimly. "Oh, we'll make sure of it." Word spread fast. By the time the disposal crew arrived, a half-dozen neighbors had wandered over, some snapping photos, others just shaking their heads. One elderly couple told me they'd been paying her $50 a month for road maintenance. That never happened. A single mom said Karen threatened to take her to court over a backyard swing set. Every story was another nail in the coffin of her so-called authority. That afternoon, the county posted an official notice on the gate. "This property is private and not subject to HOA governance." Felt like a final line drawn in the sand. Karen never came back to the land. The prosecutor filed charges for fraud, harassment, and unlawful occupation. Last I heard, she took a plea deal for probation and restitution, though no one's holding their breath about seeing that money returned. The pasture feels bigger now without her trailer sitting there like a bad memory. I've started reseeding the grass, and on quiet evenings, I stand at the fence line and watch the wind roll through it, carrying away the last trace of her presence. Some battles you win with a fight. Others you win by knowing the law better than the person trying to twist it against you. This was one of those battles, and it ended exactly the way it needed to. So what do you think? Was I right to give her the 24-hour deadline, or should I have had the sheriff remove her the moment she tried to drag me into her fake HOA?